But anyway, want to get your calls in. This is your chance to kind of chime in here. They're wrapping up the season. They do end up, in fact, finishing 7-9. And, you know, I'm telling you, I lobbied. It meant a lot to me. I thought finishing 8-8, you have a different taste in your mouth. You have a whole different sort of feeling. And I stand by it. I think being 7-9 just absolutely blows. 8-8's not that much better, but I just think you have a slightly different take on things and a slightly different momentum going in the offseason. You feel a little better about yourself. Now, maybe that would have been some false confidence because you played some bad football teams down the stretch, but still, just a dreadful way to end the season as far as I'm concerned. But you know what? Maybe if you're one of these guys that wants to start over, not give Kirk a lot of money, build the football team in other ways, that was probably a dream scenario for you because the quarterback went out there and played his worst game, as a skin.
And Gruden is now 28-35 in his career as head coach of the Redskins. Well, throwing the tie. But, 28-35. Now, this year, like you said, the injuries certainly cost them some games.
Injuries were devastating.
So maybe they finish 9-7, 10-6 if they're relatively healthy. 10-6 doesn't get them in the playoffs anyway. If they would lose the tiebreaker to the Falcons, I believe. So even if you got to 10 wins.
That would have been one of those rare years, and I would have lost money because I say if you get to 10-6, you got a 93% historically to get in. This year, I guess you wouldn't.
Yeah. But 10-6, you're on what? Dude, we have a good team.
Yeah, 10-6. Well, I would
really
even argue
NFC.
And I said this last week, 8-8, even with all the injuries, even the fact that we had the third most injuries in football, we had 20 guys on injury reserve, 10 of whom had started games, 8 who were week 1 starters, right? There's no question about it. This team was hit by injury. They still, you could make the argument, had a shot at the playoffs this year if Josh Doxson holds on to the ball against Kansas City and if they don't have the epic collapse against the Saints. Right? You still have an opportunity to win 10 games. So this team, while they have a lot of holes, and I don't even know, and this will be something that we talk about over the next few months, I don't even know where to begin when you start the draft. I guess if Kirk ends up walking, then that obviously becomes your number one priority somehow. But assuming they have – I don't even know where to look because they need a number one receiver. They need a number one running back. I think they obviously need more depth along the offensive line. They need more help on the D-line.
Up in the secondary.
They're going to lose Bashaud Breeland, so they're probably going to need some more depth there in the secondary. Linebacker is a big question. They got a bunch of guys they could lose. They could conceivably lose Zach Brown, Will Compton, and Mason Foster.
Yep, lose them all.
So, I mean, I don't even know. Where do you look? God, can you imagine if you were responsible for drafting for the Redskins this year? Where would you start? I don't even know where you'd start.
Yeah, well, first thing you do, like you said, you decide what you're going to do with Kirk.
That's going to be the first.
And then everything else kind of falls into place. And with the Seahawks game, okay, historically Seattle doesn't lose games out there, and it was a big win because no one expected them to win. But Seattle, obviously, this year was not the Seattle Seahawks we're used to seeing, especially in that building, because they lost 4 games there. They just weren't very good there. So, yes, it was a big win because it's a road win, but it's not like you beat the Seattle Seahawks from 3-4 years ago.
No, but I think the point is that even with all of the injuries, if they had done what they were supposed to do and beaten the Giants, they could have still found a way to eke out 10 wins. Now, it would have been short, and that wouldn't have gotten them into the playoffs. But that's what was kind of remarkable. That's the pro-Jay Gruden case you can make. I'm pretty neutral on it because I love him as an offensive coordinator. I love him as an interview. I love him as a guy to hang out and have beers with. I don't love him as a head coach. The negative, the anti-Jay Gruden argument is, well, 3 of the last 5 games, they played their worst football. They played their worst football against the Cowboys, the Chargers, and the Giants in 3 of the last 5. And
I throw the Giant loss out. I really do. The game didn't mean anything. The weather sucked. Now, if that game meant to get to the playoffs, it's different. But he had Tyler Catalina at left tackle.
He did.
What's the Bibbs kid's name?
Right. Jason, I'm not blaming him. Listen, that's one thing. They lost. But they lost in a horrible way. It was, I'm just saying, they had 3 of their worst 3 performances were in their last 5 games. They just were.
Yep.
So you could have made the argument they had won their last 3. It's just a total different take when you lay an egg like that. And there's no getting around it. I think their 3 worst performances were in their last 5 games. And the 2 of those wins in between there were against 2 woeful teams with 2 woeful quarterbacks.
True, but you can't tell me injuries didn't play a role in all of those losses.
Of course, they played a role in the entire season. But
and by the way, they weren't good enough to beat with all his injuries, you're not good enough to beat the Chargers. You're not good enough to beat Phillip Rivers.
That's fine.
Not with
and
all those backups.
I thought that game was going to be difficult. But just to completely lay an egg the way they did, I think in the anti-Jay Gruden case, if you want to go and you attack Jay, you get the guy better to play and have more competitive games against the Chargers. And what they did in the last week against the Giants, while it really was kind of irrelevant, it still was it was one of their 3 worst performances. So you were kind of building a case for, wow, this team didn't pack it in. But they kind of did. Yeah, I can make the argument they kind of did because they had their 3 worst games. Because going into that, their first 11 or 12 games or so, you could say, wow, this team, they compete week in and week out. They give you everything you got. They're a competitive football team. They're losing games, sure, but damn, they play hard. 3 of the last 5, they got smoked.